Thank you for being here today, and thank you to Mrs. Bridget Teboh for this conference. So, Mrs. Teboh, you are an associate professor in history department in the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Your path is rather impressive, I must say. You graduated from the University Jean Moulin in Lyon, the University of Yaoundé, and the University of California, where you doctorated with a PhD in history with some interesting specialties: colonial Africa, women and gender, African American women. And this is why in your teaching career we encounter courses such as Women and Gender in Africa, Introduction to African Civilizations, or Contemporary African Issues. Today you are among us to talk about Bamenda, and you will certainly shed light on why you entitled this conference, Bamenda, a city of culture, hope and despair in Cameroon. Mrs. Teboh, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm happy that we are all here. I was beginning to wonder that nobody was going to be here because 6 o'clock is a very difficult time. So I'm happy that you are here. The title of my paper, as you can see, is Bamenda, a city of culture and hope, as well as despair in Cameroon. Now, don't let the word despair fool you, because the fact that there is some level of desperation doesn't take away from the city of Bamenda as a mega city in Cameroon and one of the largest of those cities. And so the first slide that we have is just a view of downtown Bamenda. And it's a very interesting view because you go downhill and then you encounter the city. And so you're at the top of a mountain and it's nestled between these beautiful mountain sides. We also have that view from Bamenda Station. And station itself is one of those historic sites because it was the seat of government for the colonial government, first the British, first the Germans, then the British, and then the French. And so Bamenda, as well as Cameroon, has a very interesting history, a history that some would say is a loaded history, because unlike many other ex-colonies in Africa, it was colonized by those three imperial powers: the Germans, the British, and the French. And so for the case of Bamenda itself, we have conflicting issues at play here, because not only is the city a big city, Bamenda is also a region, and Bamenda also refers to the people that inhabit that region of Cameroon. And so the presentation comprises 4 brief sections. The first one will be introduction, and that looks at the geopolitical context of Bamenda, where we will be able to at least talk a little bit and problematize that particular locale. We will also look at the historic context of what is known as Southern Cameroons, because it is one of the only 2 Anglophone regions or English-speaking regions in the country. The second section, titled Majestic Bamenda Culture, really looks at the cultural aspect of that city. It looks at the region as a cultural hub and as one of those branding cities in the entire nation of Cameroon. It is a cultural center because it has couple of kingdoms that existed long before European colonizers came in. And so when Dr. Zingraf first went through the Bamenda grasslands in 1884, he encountered this beautiful lush area. And so Bamenda has been called by several names historically, and I'll get to that shortly. The third section looks at hope, not only for a region, but also for a nation, because the hope aspect looks at all the freedom fighters and all the leaders that have emerged from Southern Cameroons and from Bamenda in particular. We look at the continuing violation of that contested occupation and administration by what is known as La République du Cameroun within the context of the violation of Article 4B of the Constitutive Act of the African Union. Section 4 looks at the political maneuverings of the government of La République. Political maneuverings because there's a general consensus that the government of Cameroon is inherently inept as well as ineffective, and they only believe in divide and conquer. They don't believe in any policies that can elevate poverty. They don't believe in anything that can help the region or the nation grow. In fact, the head of state of Cameroon practically lives in France half the time. And I think he's the only president in the world that leaves his country and goes away for 4 months. No explanations to the people. Nobody asks questions. And so the people that he has handpicked to serve in his government accompany him to the airport and stand there and clap as he leaves. That's the only head of state in the world that does that. And so the problems of Cameroon, therefore, are multifaceted. Of course, we're going to conclude by what the people are saying today. And by the people, I mean the people of Bamenda, the people of Southern Cameroons, because that is also the place or the birthplace of political opposition in Cameroon. And so let me quickly segue into it because I'm conscious of the time. I'll start with the introduction. Looking at that geopolitical context from its expansion as a colonial headquarters for the Germans and the British in Southern Cameroons, Bamenda has gone through several evolutionary stages and played significant roles not only politically, but economically, socially, and culturally in the life of the nation. Now that nation, as I mentioned before, is now in a very contested space. Contested because many people are disgruntled, many people are unhappy with the current situation, and so they are looking for change. And that is why, within that context, we have people now saying enough is enough. And once you say enough is enough in the African context, it is a very bad thing, because it means either you are part of the opposition or you will be labeled a terrorist and thrown in jail simply because you spoke out. And so that is where the Southern Cameroons is today. Now, in terms of that particular historical background, Bamenda, as I said before, is the capital city of the northwest region of Cameroon. And Bamenda is one of 2 English-speaking regions of Cameroon. Bamenda is not only the name of a city, it is the name of the people who live in that area. And it is also that particular region. Now, in terms of size, we cannot really compare African cities to, say, European cities or American cities. But in light of Africa, Bamenda is a big city. And as a big city, it has its own share of problems with mismanagement of resources. It has problems of poor infrastructure. It has a problem of inequalities and lack of resources. And that, coupled with the fact that government and government delegates who are not voted by the people, but are appointed by the head of state or his cohort, then do not serve the people. Because if you are not elected or chosen by the people, your allegiance is with the person who gave you the job. And so for that reason, all roads, as we say, lead to Yaoundé. Now Yaoundé is the capital city of Cameroon. And so as a capital city, then we also have that notion of center and periphery, where then Bamenda becomes a periphery because it's not the capital city, Yaoundé. Now Yaoundé is the capital of the entire nation. So the rest of the 8 regions are part of what is known as East Cameroon, or the Francophone territories in Cameroon. And so that gives us an interesting way of already looking at some of the problems that are going to arise from this specific locale, or the issue, the notion of being quote-unquote Bamenda. We have the fact that we have despair in the title shouldn't fool you, because for all intents and purposes, I think Bamenda is the most powerful city in Cameroon, because when Bamenda speaks, the entire country listens. Bamenda is the hub of political ideas, is the hub of cultural ideas, and it is also the breadbasket for the entire nation. All the food that is eaten in the cities come from Bamenda. The most hardworking people in the country come from Bamenda. And so the most enterprising people in the country also come from Bamenda, in spite of lack of support by government. And so that begs to ask, what is the purpose of being with a government or a people don't really care for you? And so today, people are so disgruntled that they're thinking of that union between East Cameroon and West Cameroon as a bad marriage. And so if there's a bad marriage and you think staying in that marriage, somebody might die, then you get a divorce. And so that is the situation that is happening right now in Bamenda and in Cameroon. Now, in terms of background of the people, Bamenda is made out of 5 ethnicities, and those ethnicities are the Tikar, the Tev, the Mambela, the Wedekum, and the Kambe. And all these ethnicities, therefore, are part of this bigger entity, the region of Bamenda. Now, and again, I mentioned that Bamenda is not only the capital city. Bamenda is now used to describe all these smaller towns in the northwest region of Cameroon, because the other English-speaking part of the country is the southwest region of Cameroon, with other cities like Boya and Tiko and Limbe, very close to Douala. And so it gives us an interesting way to look at the dynamics of inequalities in Cameroon, as well as the power of cities, especially cities like Bamenda. Now, historically also, I mentioned that Bamenda was colonized by the Germans, and then the British, and then the French. And so because of that, Bamenda also had to go through a series of issues that impacted the region. And so between 1920 and 1946, Bamenda became a UN-mandated territory after the Germans lost World War I. And so because the Germans lost World War I, their territories in Cameroon and other places in Africa like Tanganyika and Togo were divided between the British and the French. And so parts of German Cameroon went to Britain, the other part went to France. Between 1954 and 1961, you now had UN trust territory that came after 1946 all the way up to 1954. Trust territory because then they were protected territories of the British. And so the British now managed and ruled that trust territory with their other possessions in Nigeria. Now, 1954 to 1961 then, when Africans already started agitating and wanting to get independence and sharing the grievances of all the bad things that colonial masters were doing, various countries in Africa were clamoring to get independence. And so Cameroon and Southern Cameroons was also part of that movement. And so, because they had already dabbled with self-government between 1954 and 1961, they were hoping that at independence, they would have the possibility of self-government. Now, what happened at this moment, therefore, becomes part of the unraveling problems that we're going to be discussing. Because at a particular moment in history, the English-speaking Cameroonians believe that their independence was stolen with the complicity of the British and the United Nations. Of course, France, because they had to benefit ultimately, were part of it. And so there is this idea of conspiracy, quote unquote, against the English Cameroonians, that everybody knows that there was a problem and nobody took the time to solve that problem. When Southern Cameroons dabbled with self-government, they had their own prime minister. In fact, two, between 1954 and 1961. The first one was E.M. Ndele from the southwest region of Cameroon, the other Anglophone territory. And you had John Gu Foncha from Bamenda. And so between the two of them, they were the ones who now showed up at the 1961 plebiscite when Cameroonians from East Cameroon, the Francophone territory, came to decide whether they were going to have independence or they were going to become part of the ex-colonies of France and remain with France. And so the option that was given at that time, when they discussed this before they went to that plebiscite, they had three options. The first option was to join the northern British Trust Territory in the further north of Cameroon, Adamawa, Marua, and Garua, or join the eastern part of Nigeria, where the British years before managed that territory as one because they were too crafty or too stingy to spend money. And so they had one administrative seat in Lagos with one governor and one residence. And because Cameroon does share one boundary with Nigeria, it was easy to do that because it was actually the same place. The third option, which is where the problem is, meant that Southern Cameroons, or the Bamenda province of the British Cameroons, could now be independent. Now, the excuse that was given at that time, because they had bungled the whole issue, and they left out the third option. And so representatives from Southern Cameroon got to the plebiscite or to the table and saw that they had two options: join Nigeria or join East Cameroon. And so they asked what happened to the third option, and they said, oh, you are too small to have that third option. Oh, we can't find that third option. Oh, we should just hurry and do this because people want to take the boat and go back to England. And they're like, no, this is not what we talked about. And so because they were not even given time to breathe or to look at the issue properly, they now had to choose the better of two evils. And so they thought, well, East Cameroon is Cameroon anyway. And so we may as well go with our brothers and sisters. And at that time, even those who did not enter the room were not happy because they said, do not do it. We can postpone the plebiscite, would rather stay as a trust territory for another 4 months. We can wait. But they were not even given that option. So they voted to join East Cameroon. And so joining East Cameroon then, the condition was that they were joining East Cameroon because it was going to be a federation, a federated state, Federal Republic of Cameroon, made up of East Cameroon, which is the French territory, and West Cameroon, which is the English territory. And those prime ministers, Ndele and Foncha, were going to continue to manage the affairs of West Cameroon, and Ahijo and company were going to manage the affairs of East Cameroon as federated states. And so now the problem becomes what happened to that federation. Because over the years, we had a couple of issues that came up. And so I will talk about those issues down the road. And so now we move to section 2. Already at the end of section 1, we see that there is a problem that is brewing. This plebiscite that was forced on the people, and the third option taken from them. Now we move quickly to the Majestic Bamenda. Now that they have a plebiscite, that still doesn't take away from the majestic notion that they had of themselves. Bamenda, again as a region and as a city, has a recognizable, rich cultural heritage. Bamenda has powerful kingdoms. Some of them are Bafut, Mancon. Nso, Bali, and Mogamo kingdoms, some of them more than 1,000 years old. In fact, when the German explorer Zingraf came through Bamenda territory, he encountered some of these kingdoms and befriended some and harassed some. And so the idea that African civilization or African history started with Europeans is a fallacy that has long been debunked, but some people still want to think that way. Perhaps it makes them feel good. But African history existed long before Europeans showed up in Africa. That is why we had those kingdoms. Now, Bamenda, it's also made up of very loving, hardworking, and hospitable people. They welcome everybody with open arms. And sometimes that hospitality actually is not good for them, because they welcome everybody and then people, you know, some of them are quite sneaky. They turn against them. And so, but they're still very hospitable people. The economy is agriculturally based, but that economy has been transformed tremendously and is still in the process of being transformed by not only processes of, you know, colonization and neo-colonization, but also the new phenomenon of globalization. Because now people are trying to make sure that their product get to far off places, and so they have to start dabbling with not only branding, but trying to process semi-finished goods. And so that is a very interesting thing that is happening in Bamenda. It is also nestled at the foot of the Mendankwe Hill, now that little hill that we saw at the beginning. And before unification, it was very self-sufficient. It had its own airstrips. It had one in Bali, one in Bafut, one in Bisongobang, one in Tiko, and it had a seaport and a river port in John Holt, Manthe, and Limbe. What happened with the seaports becomes part of that quote-unquote despair that I mentioned in the beginning. Because once reunification occurred and that federal republic became a reality, most of those things were shut down. Instead of expanding them so that they can continue to grow, they were just summarily shut down. And the equipment moved to East Cameroon or to Yaoundé, where they were not even protected or maintained, and they just became part of the junkyard. And so the issue, therefore, that we're raising is whether or not Bamenda people have a right to self-determination. And if so, how are they going to restore that independence peacefully without degenerating into warfare? Because at the rate that things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if we have another Rwanda on our hands. And normally we wait for things to escalate before we intervene. And so this is a call out to the powers that be to know that something is brewing in Cameroon and it's not really good. I argue that the reason for that despair stems from not only the unification, but also the very dubious and contested circumstances under which independence occurred in Cameroon. Now, in terms of problematizing the Anglophone problem, because many people also really don't think that there is a problem. And unfortunately, that is even what Cameroonians, especially those Cameroonians who speak French, they don't seem to think that there is a problem, partly because they are the privileged ones in the country. And they also don't have the vision to see that the problem that Bamenda people have is a problem that affects them. And so to problematize the Anglophone problem, therefore, is to ask whether or not there is a problem in Cameroon. The answer, according to me, is absolutely there is a problem, and there is an Anglophone problem. But it's not only a linguistic problem, as most people want to minimize it by saying, oh, you know, Cameroon is bilingual and everybody is supposed to speak French. Therefore, if Anglophones find themselves in the court system, in Yaoundé, for example, they should speak French. of course, that is not a problem because the bilingualism in Cameroon only works for Anglophones. I'm one of those who experienced it firsthand. And so, as an English-speaking Cameroonian, you only had to go to the one university that existed in the country, and it was in the capital city, in Yaoundé. You get to Yaoundé, you realize that all your professors speak French. So if you're going to do English literature or linguistics or law, then you have to sit there and listen to this person yap in French. And then you try to borrow notes from your classmate who really didn't even know what they were taking. And so both of you are going to fail because the person you are borrowing notes from had no clue what the man was lecturing about anyway. Even if they spoke French, they did not have the aptitude to understand what the man was saying. And so those problems, therefore, as much as they are English-speaking or French-speaking problems, they are deep-seated and systemic in government. And so if you go to Cameroon today and you try to take the temperature of quote-unquote bilingual people, you realize that almost all Anglophones are perfectly bilingual. They speak very good French because they're forced to speak French. Now, the Francophones in Cameroon don't see any reason to speak English. And that is what actually triggered the series of problems that culminated into the protests of December 2016. That is ongoing right now as we speak. And so it is a serious problem. And so the problem is not just between language issues, but it is a problem of bad governance. So that we don't sit here and say, oh, you know, we have a problem with Francophones in Cameroon or we have a problem with Anglophones in Cameroon. That is not the problem. The problem is the systematic, institutionalized segregation by Cameroon government. That government happens to be a Francophone government. And in case you didn't know, the head of state of Cameroon has been there for 34 years and counting. We call them presidents for life in Africa for a reason. They stay there until they die or some other lunatic kicks them out. And so he's been there for 34 years. He doesn't think that he should step down. In fact, he's planning elections for next year. And so that is going to be a serious problem for him, or that might actually be his undoing and the undoing of France-Afrique relations. Because the Cameroon government is tied intimately to French politics, because France is the one maintaining those dictators and tyrants in office. Because if they maintain them in office, then they can also go in and take the diamonds and take the timber and take everything that they can take without question. And so it is a catch-22. How do you deal with one head of state when you have 3 or 4 others in ex-French colonies doing the exact same thing, getting the support from the West that they need to stay in power in terms of weaponry, in terms of all kinds of guns and ammunition, and absolutely marginalizing their citizens? That is a problem that we have in Cameroon. And so marginalizing Anglophones is also the marginalization of citizens of Cameroon as a whole. Because while the head of state stays in power for 34 years, if there are no roads, it's not just because there are no roads in Anglophone areas, there are no roads in Francophone areas. Although, if we're going to compare X to X, at least the Francophone region has good paved roads compared to the Anglophone part of the country. December, I was fortunate enough, well, now I don't know whether I'm fortunate or unfortunate, to go to Cameroon for Christmas. And I decided, oh, fine, this is a good time to go do a little research, and then I can see my aunts and other people in Cameroon. And so I flew from here to, from New York to Brussels. From Brussels, I flew to Douala. From Douala to Bamenda. Normally, it's about 6 hours by road, because at least that one road used to be tarred. So leaving Douala or Yaoundé to Bamenda usually took 6 hours. Now, from Yaoundé to around Bafoussam, for those who may have been to Cameroon at some point, or you could Google and see, takes the 5 hours. And then from just outside Bafoussam, from Buda to Bamenda, a journey that, you know, grandparents used to do on foot. They used to trek. It's 40 minutes. It took me 5 hours. From Buda to Bamenda, I was more tired than the 2 days that I spent traveling by air. And so when I asked people in Bamenda, they said, oh, government is punishing us for talking too much. And that is the other thing with Bamenda. Bamenda is a very powerful city because Bamenda talks too much. And so you measure the tempo of political crisis or economic crisis in Cameroon by talking to people in Bamenda or seeing how Bamenda reacts to government ideas and government policies. Because Bamenda coordinates all of those things, and Bamenda has the capacity to control the population. And that is why the country has been unable to control the crisis that is happening in Cameroon right now. Did I mess up my... Oh. Okay. And so here we are with the marginalization of the Southern Cameroons and the English-speaking Cameroons. We have 3 dates that are very problematic. We have the 1961 plebiscite date, and we have the 1972 quote-unquote reunification, and we have 11 February. Now, 11 February is actually that plebiscite day. And so when I say in terms of problematizing the Anglophone problem, we cite bad governance and ill will exemplified by a couple of things. We have name changes, for example, by La République du Cameroun. We have bad faith and segregation against Anglophones. We have the total marginalization of Southern Cameroons. We have these examples that I've given, and these are examples that speak to that marginalization. 1961, which is plebiscite day, is what Southern Cameroonians celebrated a couple of weeks ago in terms of 11 February. And within the context of the riots and protests that are going on in Cameroon, they went back to plebiscite day, and they declared a day of mourning because that's the day that Southern Cameroons died. That fake federation that did not last 2 minutes. Because once they voted at the plebiscite and they had that Federal Republic of Cameroon, then the head of state decided single-handedly to change the constitution and went from the Federal Republic of Cameroon to United Republic of Cameroon. Now you go from federal to united. You are still hoping that you are united. And so you are working together. And so you can share the resources and you can manage the country together. By the way, the resources that are exploited in Cameroon all come from the English-speaking part of the country. From the petrol or gas to timber and oil and all kinds of things come from that region. But that is the region that has the least developed areas in the country. And so that is a serious problem because it means that for more than 50 years, Anglophones have realized that 2 countries that were brought together are incompatible. Not because the people are unwilling, but because government is unwilling, and particularly the Biya regime is unwilling to do anything to help. And so now you have 2 distinct flags. This is the flag for the Southern Cameroons in blue. This is the flag for La République du Cameroun. Because once they did the United Republic of Cameroon, and then down the road, he decided again, in terms of name change, to go from United Republic back to La République du Cameroun. And so what Anglophone lawyers and other political pundits are saying is that if you went through these name changes, it means you are deliberately trying to minimize the Anglophones or the English-speaking part of the country. because there's really no point in changing the name from United Republic or Federal Republic to La République du Cameroon. And so going back to La République means you've gone back to the pre-plebiscite era, and therefore you don't want the Anglophones to be part of you. And so occupying Anglophone territory and sending your governors and gendarmes and police to work in the Anglophone part of the country is illegal. And that is where they have the quagmire now. And so for that reason then, we have all kinds of protests that have been going on since November. And so Southern Cameroonians in the diaspora have been actively participating in the protests, because since November also, ghost towns have been declared. And when we talk about ghost town, it's the most effective weapon against government, because it means everything is shut down. You don't have guns, yes, you don't have any weapons, but you go sit in front of the governor's office, or you just shut your store and your schools and everything, and you stay at home, which means the economy is not functioning right, which means all the food that the hungry people in the cities are waiting to come from Bamenda, there's no food. And so the toll on the economy of the country is really heavy. And everywhere now, Southern Cameroonians are adopting this flag and the T-shirts each time that they protest. We have now, this is in terms of the cultural power of the Bamenda region, this unique traditional dress, which forms the sort of branding for Southern Cameroons and Bamenda. This is part of the power of that city, because everywhere this outfit is recognizable, to the point that it has actually ascended to the level of quote-unquote national dress for the entire country. We see our Olympic players wearing the dress. We see visitors to Cameroon being offered that dress. And we have different variations of the dress here. I'm just showing you. People wear it with pride. Even our children wear it because they need to know their origins. Now, quickly to talk about the hope of the region, we want to look at that hope from a political standpoint. The Social Democratic Front is the face of opposition in Cameroon. In 1992, when the Democratic Wind of Change passed through the country and Africa in general, that was the party that emerged, and that was the party that forced La République to go the multi-party way, because there had been a one-party system since independence. And so the only party that existed was the CNU, Cameroon National Union. And then when Biya took over, he changed it to CPDM, Cameroon People's Democratic Movement. And so the SDF, Social Democratic Fund, emerged, and people rallied around it because it gave hope for multi-partyism, for changes to occur in the country. And so the motto for SDF is power to the people. And so when they say power to the people, it involves everybody. It involves the street vendors, involves the puss guys, involves everybody. Then we have the Southern Cameroons National Council with motto, the force of argument, not the argument of force. Because many people have been saying that, okay, if the country is brutalizing people and killing their children and imprisoning them, then they also should do something. But because of these two strong parties and liberation movements that do not believe in warfare, they want people to do the peaceful negotiating. And the negotiations have failed because government has refused to listen to people. And so I will end here for now so that we can take some questions, because we ran out of time. But I think we'll have more to say when we get into the question and answer session. Thank you.
We will now take questions from the audience.
Merci. Thank you. I just want to know why do you think a new federal republic is not a solution to these problems, these Anglophone problems?
Oh, because people are tired of the fake federation, because we had a federation before. It didn't work. It never worked, and there was no willpower to make it work. Instead, systematically, the English-speaking part of the country was completely ignored, its resources depleted, and its leaders thrown in jail for speaking up. And so government response has been to consistently throw leaders in jail, consistently refuse to listen to the demands of the people, because every 2 minutes, every year or so, you have the lawyers and the political party leaders who say, look, this is not how things are done. If we have 40 secretaries of state in the country and we're supposed to be quote-unquote bilingual, at least 2 or 3 should come from the Anglophone region. And it's not happening. And so people know that whatever government says now, it's a lie, because they're used to lying. Ghost towns have been going on in Cameroon since November, which means the academic year in Cameroon has really not started, because in the English-speaking zones, the call for ghost towns meant no schools, no courts, nothing. Ville morte. And so everything is dead on Mondays and Tuesdays. And so that has created a problem that, you know, the government is running around trying to do what they usually do best, bribery and corruption. And this time, they can't get candidates, because you always have those people who are eager to get money. So they will sell their soul to get an extra $1 or $2 or euro. This time, because students were killed at the University of Boya and in the streets in Bamenda, simply because they were protesting with placards. Killed. Then grandmothers came out, and rural women came out, and all the parents in the villages, they're like, okay, we divorced you a long time ago. Now you are killing our children for no reason. And so everybody is respecting the ville morte. And the time that government was supposed to have that peaceful dialogue that was called upon by political leaders and English-speaking lawyers and leaders, they missed that moment. Because in December, when lawyers, Anglophone lawyers, sent a motion to the head of state and the Minister of Justice that you cannot send French-speaking lawyers and judges to Bamenda, where they don't understand common law, they don't understand British common law. They have the civil law, whatever it obtains in France, that they use. And so instead of listening to them, they just send soldiers to go beat up the lawyers, tackle them on the streets and remove their, you know, that black robe that they wear with the cap, tackle them in the streets and beat them up. And then teachers who also tabled the same motion, that you cannot send Francophones to teach elementary school in the Anglophone regions, because when you send Anglophones to the Francophone regions, they're going to teach English. They're not going to teach chemistry. And even if they have to teach chemistry, they are the bilingual ones in the country, so they don't have a problem. But it doesn't work the other way around. And so between the lawyers and the teachers who were brutalized before Christmas, that is the reason for the ghost town. And that is the moment that government missed that dialogue that they were supposed to have. And so the meeting that they were supposed to have to listen to these problems, they came with backloads of money to bribe people. And even the motorcycle rider who is desperate, is unemployed graduate from the university, refused to take that money. And that is when they realized that this thing has gone beyond the dialogue of federation. Because now the street vendors don't even want to hear anything about federation. They're like, we've had it. It's been 56 years. So now they're clamoring for outright independence. And so we're going to see what is going to happen, because as we speak, the killings continue. Internet has been cut in Cameroon since January 18th, because they don't want people to see the images of the atrocities that are happening in Cameroon. And so some of the images are so graphic that I don't want to shock you with those images, but they're really, really awful images. And so these are school kids who celebrated Plebiscite Day or Youth Day, which in terms of naming, government systematically changed the meaning of the Plebiscite Day and said it was a youth day, completely minimizing the fact that it was a union between West Cameroon and East Cameroon, and said it's a youth day for little kids in elementary and high school to be parading up and down in uniform, absolutely not even understanding why they're marching. They just know, oh, we have a free day to be out of school and go meet our friends and parade and get new uniforms. Whereas it's Plebiscite Day, it's the day that Southern Cameroon died. And so those problems are coming back now to bite the government. Because if they're going to think that they want to now do, the federation, now people don't want to listen to that anymore. And so it's really bad. Oh, this photo is in Yaoundé. I just wanted to show that the buildings in Yaoundé, they have the description in French. The same building in Bamenda will have the description in French. And so people are like, why? So now, since December, people have just been going crazy. Anything French that they see in Bamenda, they just put whitewash over it, you know, and write it in English. Because you go into Bamenda, you see all the road signs are in French. Because they got some contractor from Yaoundé who doesn't understand English to put the road signs, and they're putting them upside down because they don't even know what they're putting. And so those problems are really serious problems that need some form of reckoning. And so Southern Cameroonians have been in the United Nations and the International Court of Justice since 1970. They've been protesting and showing documents and doing all kinds of things. And the UN and the Africa Organization of African Unity and the International Court of Justice have heard some of the readings and reviewed the situation and said, no, you have to listen to these people. You either have to grant them that federation, you have to pack out and leave, because you are illegally settling that territory and administering that territory under false pretext. But of course, all those have gone, you know, on deaf ears. And so it's a situation where people are now saying, okay, it's like we do or die. So that is collective punishment. That is what government does best. You stand to say something or complain that your work environment is not proper or that the room is too hot, they send soldiers to come and beat you up. So they're not willing to listen, especially because the soldiers that they send to the English-speaking part of the country are all Francophones and Northerners who don't speak English. And so they come and they're harassing people all around because they have the weapons and they have the backing of government. So government cannot say they don't know about the atrocities that are being committed in the English-speaking regions. And so people continue to do the peaceful protest, even though it is so bad that one of the parliamentarians or the deputies in Cameroon, Honorable Weber, decided to use his 10 minutes in parliament to talk about the Anglophone problem and to say that for 56 years, the region has been marginalized, their resources depleted, and their persons abused and battered for no reason. And so if you have a government that doesn't listen to you, it means it's not your government. And so many people believe that it really is time to leave. It's time to leave. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so at the start of the presentation, you said people from Bamenda are the hardest workers in Cameroon.
Yes.
I feel like that's a really bold claim. I mean, I don't dispute it, but I wonder how you back that up. And then secondly, I feel like you are from Bamenda. I don't know if I'm correct.
Oh, I'm from Bamenda, and don't mind me speaking English. I speak perfect French because I grew up in Yaoundé. So many of my friends know that I'm a Wondo because I grew up in Yaoundé.
Okay.
And so that is besides the issue. We call it as we see it.
Okay, great. So I was wondering if you could get all the leaders of Bamenda or South Cameroon together in a room, what would you ask of them? What would be your call to action?
Leaders of Southern Cameroons or leaders of Cameroon?
No, leaders of Southern Cameroon.
Leaders of Southern Cameroons.
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting because I don't know whether I want to be beat up or I want to say something that I will end up as persona non grata. Because people are so upset. They are so upset that to get to the point where they are calling for ghost towns. And these are also business people and teachers. They don't have a salary. The lawyers, their practice has been shut down since November. So they are losing money. But they know that that's the only way that government can listen to them. And so what I will tell them is to continue that peaceful negotiation. And because the peaceful negotiation is something that has been summarily refused by government, the only option is peaceful demonstrations. That is why you see Cameroon Anglophone leaders, political party leaders, school teachers, lawyers, joining the protests on the streets. And that is how our lawyers got beat up in the streets by, we call them sangalon, somebody who doesn't even know how to read or write his own name. He's going to tackle a lawyer simply because he has a gun. And that is to show you the arrogance of the military in Cameroon, because those are also the only people that Paul Biya pays. Everybody works and they wait for 3-4 months without a salary. You join the military and at least you get your salary, because he is terrified that they're going to overthrow his government. And so he makes sure that he takes care of them. He pays their salary. Every now and then they have 1 or 2 generals emerging here and there for doing absolutely nothing but harass their own people. And so my call to the leaders would be to do everything to at least maintain that peace. Even if they're going to be doing the demonstrations, they need to do it peacefully. And they've been doing it peacefully. It's government that has been showing up and beating them up. And so now in almost every capital city in the world, they were protesting in Paris. They protested in London. We protested in New York. Protests in Japan, everywhere. Southern Cameroonians have taken to the streets. And they protest at the French embassy. They protest at the British embassy. They protest at the United Nations, because those are the groups of people that were responsible for the madness that Southern Cameroonians find themselves in. And so if all the documents are there to show that this problem can be resolved, and those documents have been submitted more than 20 times. I have a long list of so many of those documents that have been submitted that I don't want to belabor the point with you to see, because we're running out of time. But those documents have been submitted to the United Nations, to all kinds of international organizations, and they have agreed and determined, yes, this is a problem that can be solved. Either you go back to the Federal Republic of Cameroon, or you pack and leave. And of course, the head of state decided to ignore all of that because he's the man. He has the backing of France. Who's going to come and remove him? And so it is what it is, which is kind of frustrating. But you see people taking to the streets. Now you have all these leaders who have been locked up simply because they go out to talk about Southern Cameroon's problems. I know if I show up in Douala today, I'll be picked up, because 3 of my friends were already picked up in Yaoundé last week, just by leaving the diaspora, because they cut internet, because they thought lycée kids and everybody with a smartphone were the ones sending us all these pictures. And so they thought that was the smartest way to shut down everything and hide what was happening in the country. And so if they just see you leave, whether you're leaving France or leaving Canada or New York to go to Cameroon, you are automatically a target. Just because you speak up. Not because you are a terrorist or you've done something. No, just because you're speaking up for the rights of your people. You become a target. And so that's not how a government should function. A government should be responsible for its citizen. A government should be able to take care and provide for services, basic services. Cameroonians don't ask for much. Simple, clean water to drink. One good hospital with at least equipment and syringe that you can go have your injection. That's all they're asking for. And so people are dynamic. They work hard by themselves. That they don't really need much from government. And the little that they deserve, they can't even have. And then they want to be silenced. It's not going to happen. So that is the problem. So we're going to see what happens next. And hopefully for Cameroonians, right now what they want in Southern Cameroons is for their jail leaders to be released before the ghost towns can stop. Because right now leaders and some of those lawyers who were tackled are in jail for doing nothing. Simply for trying to say, look, this is wrong. They are thrown in jail. They're still in jail. Some of the kids that were killed, we've not seen the corpses. The parents are crying every day. They want their kids so that they can even bury them. They haven't seen them yet. And government wants people to send kids to school. They're like, no, we can't send kids to school so that you go and kill them. So the ghost town continues. No academic year in Cameroon now, at least in the southern part of the country. You know, which sucks because one would think that the French-speaking part of the country would join in the protest because it is their problem also. When the head of state goes with the backloads of money and spends all of it in some hotel in Paris or in Geneva, the Continental, it is Cameroon money that is being wasted. Money that they could use towards those roads or towards the hospitals. And so it is a serious matter for everybody. But it impacts Southern Cameroonians the most because they are the ones losing with their resources that are being depleted. I'm being shown I don't know whether it's a yellow card or the white card. I will end here. Thank you.